Do you know that God does not ask you to become a Jew? If you are what's called a righteous Gentile, if you're good to other people, you don't murder people, you don't eat flesh off of living animals, you don't steal, you don't commit adultery, you're good. You get just as good a spot in whatever you. Here's where there's huge differences in Judaism. What happens in, for right now, I'll call it the world to come. And for some people, this is like heaven. For some people, this is like the Green New Deal, and here on earth. And it can be everything in between. So from the perspective of Judaism, unless you are born a Jew, you don't have to follow the 613 commandments in the Torah. By the way, 613 commandments. 10 commandments are like the big famous ones. There's 613. And you don't even have to do all 10 if you're not a Jew. There's a list of 7, the so-called Noahide laws, Noachide. And if you follow those, you get as good a seat in heaven as the best Jew does. So the rabbis are supposed to tell you, so there's no reason for you to convert to Judaism. Secondly, you shouldn't convert to Judaism. Don't you know that we are a persecuted people? Don't you know that your grandchildren will suffer anti-Semitism? You shouldn't do this. Walk away now. Because once you convert, you can't unconvert. Let me say that a little more precisely.
Why can't you unconvert?
Because Judaism is considered a binding for life contract between the person and God. And if you are Jewish because your mother was Jewish, or in the Reformed tradition, it could also be your father. More detail we can't get into today. Then all 613 rules, except in the Reformed tradition, where we actually look at the 613 commandments and distinguish what we call cultural rituals versus ethical rules. We'll loop back to that. But by the way, what's our time frame?
I set it for an hour, but we could keep going on. I don't really have anything going on after this. I know April has to go in a little bit, but
okay. Well, I don't want to run on too long because as I said, this, I can't give you the whole story in less than a few thousand hours. But I'm trying to give you some key points here.
okay.
So let me hold off on talking about differences between Reform and Orthodox views on the commandments, Reform and Orthodox views on life after death, Reform and Orthodox views on the Mashiach or the Messiah, because there's differences. But in theory, once one has converted to Judaism, it's a binding contract until death. Now, obviously, Jews do convert to other religions. If we're going into a longer one, I'd give you a famous example of a Jew who converted to Islam. And then from the perspective of Islam, that person is now Muslim. But from the perspective of Judaism, that person is an apostate Jew. That is a Jew who is no longer accepting their half of the contract they made with God. And the thought is that that's a bad thing, to renege on your contract with God. Yeah, I know very little about Islam. I do know Islam counts like Adam as the first prophet and the first Muslim, Noah as a prophet and a Muslim, Abraham as a prophet and a Muslim, not only Ishmael, but Isaac as prophets and Muslims. Anyway, so the word, the conceptualization of who is a Muslim in Islam is certainly different from, well, okay, I'm going to leave that for somebody else. All right, so so I went through the conversion process. So altogether, I was studying for about 2 years, and it concludes when the rabbi thinks I'm ready. And regardless of which tradition of Judaism it is, there is a Beit Din, which is a Jewish court, and they interview me. They interview a person. It's kind of like taking your oral exams.
Kind of like if you can give us just a little like snippet of it, but what is the process like being interviewed?
Oh, well, it's going to vary depending on which tradition. So for Orthodox and conservative Judaism, it needs to be 3 rabbis. In Reform Judaism, it doesn't have. They don't have to be rabbis. Uh, they they simply have to be um, active, practicing Jews, um, and that's how this one worked here in Anchorage. And typically, even in Reform congregations, the rabbi that you have studied with will be one of the 3 Beit Din members. And it's 3 because Jews figured this out long ago. You need odd numbers if you're going to vote, otherwise you're host. And that's still true. But Rabbi Abram figures, well, the rabbi's not going to recommend that the Beit Din convene unless they think you're ready. So it's silly to have them in as a vote because they already, in fact, have voted in a sense by putting you forward. So they asked me questions about what drew me to Judaism, what did I like particularly about Judaism, what appealed to me about Reform Judaism, this particular strand. Those were key questions. I was slightly surprised, but only slightly surprised. They didn't ask me what I thought about God. And in a sense, ladies and gentlemen, this is an important lesson about Judaism. Let's see if I can keep these track. I've got two very different things I want to mention. One is there is a wider than the frame of this picture set of understandings of the nature of God that different Jews have held, have written about for at least the last going on 3,000 years. And that's okay. There are Jews that really don't like certain other people's definitions, but generally speaking, that's not considered to be anybody else's business. And the most profound thing, and this should be a big carry away for you guys, in contrast to Christianity, Judaism, and to my understanding also Islam, are primarily religions of practice, not religions of faith statements. And that's a profound difference. And, you know, I'm not going to go into differences among different Christian denominations on, well, if you say you're saved, and now you can go out and you can do whatever you want because you're still saved. All you have to say is sorry, and you're good. You know, so with Judaism, it's not what you believe, and certainly not what you say that you believe. You know, reciting a creed or something like that. It's what you do. We can see you. We were having a discussion last Shabbat online, and we were talking about a reading from Deuteronomy. We're just wrapping up Deuteronomy here. We read through the whole Torah, the 5 books of Moses, on an annual cycle, which is great. This is actually the first time I have read the whole Torah in my life, so I'm stoked. And thank you. And I'm reading it slowly. I'm reading it. I've got 3 different translations. I've got 5 different commentaries. So it takes me a long time to go through a given chapter because I want to go, what does that mean? And then I read through and look at what different translators have thought. Anyway, it's exciting kind of stuff. But that is in fact one of the things we're supposed to do on Shabbos or Shabbat is study Torah. We're also supposed to relax. We're supposed to spend time with family, and we're supposed to experience joy. We're commanded to do that. So it's like, yes, sir.